Hello.
Yeah.
We have Rickey Purdin, talent
Hello.
manager at Marvel.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
It is quite the honor. So for those at home who don't know what basically a talent manager does,
Sure.
what does your job consist of?
It's a lot of stuff. The majority of it is talent scouting for Marvel, going to conventions, going to schools, looking online to find new talent, whether that's writers or artists or colorists or cover artists. It's finding new artists, new talent to bring into Marvel, into Shape. But it's also to work with our editorial group, the editors, and the existing artists and writers to kind of up their game. And try to find the next best person for the next project they're casting for.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of stuff all at once. It's fun. It's fun. Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's interesting that you call it casting when
Casting.
you're talking about the writers, the comics creators.
Yeah, it's sometimes casting, and sometimes that's a little bit cold. It's more like hiring, because what we do is we try to match. We try to match artists up with the right tone of a book. You have to find, if there's a street level book like Moon Knight, or if it's a big superhero book like Avengers, there's different tones. If there's a book like Squirrel Girl, there are different looks for different books, and so we have to kind of figure out who fits the right project. So it's kind of casting, but it's also very much, looking for the right talent, really.
Have you ever taken a real risk on someone, like someone who didn't seem like a typical choice, but you went with it anyway because they had a really great idea?
Yeah, and the editors at Marvel are great about that. The comics that we do now are more diverse than they've ever been. We publish a book like Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur at the same time that we publish something like Punisher, and they're very different, but they're also they're still very Marvel at the core. They're characters that are driven with a message, and they've got feet of clay, and they're trying to struggle through. But at the end of the day, they triumph over evil. We say Marvel is the world outside your window, and we want to have a lot of different kinds of books that still feel like Marvel, but show a diverse range of kinds of stories. And so that means a diverse range of talent to do those books as well.
For those fans that have a dream to work for Marvel, what's some advice that you would give up-and-coming writers and artists?
Yeah, sure. One of the best things is to come to a show like this.
Yeah.
There are hundreds of people here who also want to make comics. And so if you're a writer who can't find an artist, come here. If you're an artist who can't find a writer, come here. If you're a creator who wants to meet with an editorial person, someone who runs the show, come here. Because if it's not Marvel, it could be any of the other companies that are here as well.
Yeah.
You're never going to find a concentration of more resources than at a show like San Diego, or shows across the country, or shows across the world. So that's one thing. The other thing is to do the work.
Yeah.
You've got to, if you want to make comics, you've got to actually write your comic. You have to find someone to collaborate. You have to color comics. You have to do cover artwork. Even when you don't want to, even when you're tired, even when school's in the way, even when work is in the way or family's in the way, in order to get into comics, you have to do the work. And so that's the biggest thing, is actually work.
Yeah. That's
That's very cool. So, as with any part of pop culture, there are always trends.
Sure.
And there are certainly trends with comics. If you've ever looked at older comics, you definitely see some of them were signs of the time. And sometimes it works out, and sometimes it looks very of the time, which is fine and great, in my opinion. An old 80s or 90s comic looks very 80s or 90s. How do you stay ahead of trends? How do you try to find the next big thing in comics?
I think Marvel's always kind of tapped into the larger zeitgeist going on in the world. A lot of our stories may not be directly about something that's happening in the world, but they're parables or they're metaphors for things. And so as we change as a society, we also change as an entertainment company. We try to find entertainment that helps people relax from what's going on in the world, or to help them relate in a different way with what's going on in the world. And so we also look at what other publishers are doing. Sometimes the best tactic is to steal. And so if someone's doing something that's successful, you may as well do our version of that thing. Not exactly copy it, but do a version of it at least. And so, like you said, sometimes a certain style is in. Like right now, there are a lot of artists who are doing a little bit more of a digital style, a slicker, cleaner style on some variant covers and things, and those do well for us. And then other times there are classic artists like Alex Ross who does a timeless piece, and that's timeless for a reason. It's something that will continue to sell for us. So it's just kind of keeping our eye on the market, keeping our eye on the world, and seeing what is popular with people who are eating pop culture. So
When I'm guessing you read a bunch of comics when you were a kid.
Yes.
Yeah. So
yes, too many.
So I'm guessing you're in a dream role right now.
Yes.
So your younger self could look at you now. What do you think they would say?
how come you got so chubby and lost all your hair? What happened to us?
Aw.
What happened to us?
You wouldn't be nice with that?
No, I never dreamt that it would be possible to work in comics. But that's a great point. Like, I never thought that there was a job in comics that I could get. I mean, you guys work in comics. People who are running the booth here, people who are helping with security in the front. That's in comics. And so I think it's important to know that no matter what your interests are, legal or contracts or finance, those roles are all part of comics too. And so I wish someone had told me back then, think about what you want to do and go after that, because there's a role for you in comics somewhere. And also probably younger me would have said, bring back Darkhawk. That's your favorite character. Let's do a Darkhawk comic, which we're doing right now.
Which we're doing now, yeah.
Yeah.
He's
So,
during the
You
Infinity.
made your dream come true.
Yeah. I can go
Good
to
for
bed
you.
now for 100 years. I'm very happy. But yeah.
That's awesome. So what does a day look like as a talent manager?
Every day, I'm not exaggerating, is different. I get hundreds of emails every day. I read hundreds of emails every day. I answer dozens of emails every day. I don't have time to get back to all of them, and it kills me, because I wish I had more hours in the day to actually give some TLC to each of those emails, each correspondence that I get. So, like I said, hundreds of emails every day, meetings to talk about what the editorial group needs. I find out that one of our freelancers is sick. I get in touch to see if they need anything from us. I found out that one of our freelancers is behind. I get in touch to see if they need something from us. And if the editor needs something from us, an editor is having problems with an inker who maybe is not quite getting the instructions they're asking for. So I sit down with the editor and talk through, have them work on these things, maybe give them this resource as a resource to figure out how to get through the problem that they're dealing with. So every day is different and rewarding. Like I leave knowing that I've got 38 things I still have to do that I didn't finish yet, and I wake up in the morning knowing I've got 170 new things I should take care of. And because of my role at Marvel, I also get to work with different lines of business, the video game group, our online group, and so getting to meet and collaborate with not just the people who do the work for us on the comics, but also the people who do the different kinds of jobs within the company is also rewarding, because all of us are a part of a team, and it's good to have camaraderie and to feel like, hey, we're all doing the same thing for a greater cause. So every day is different. Every day is different.
That's
And it sounds like a really rewarding kind of career where you're not just opening the gateway for talent, you get to be a part of the process after the fact too.
Yeah. And so it's not lost on me that I get to be a part of the gateway, like helping people get into the company, giving them sample scripts. I send people sample scripts. I send people sample cover prompts to do covers. I send people sample inks to color over. We send lots of different samples out to people. So giving them tips on how to get better. And then nothing feels better than in a year later, they come up and they've got new samples and it's like, you know what, you got it. Like, it's time for you to start. We can put you on this book. And they feel really great, and it feels really good too to help them out. And in the best cases, they go on to an ongoing book, and they come to conventions and they do signings and they get to meet fans, and suddenly they're part of this world too. So it feels great. And like you said, actually helping the editorial staff understand things like techniques and how an inker should work or how a cover should be better, getting to help them understand visually how to do comics too is also rewarding. So it's a lot of fun.
You just had a panel earlier today with CB.
Yes.
The ins and out of the comic book industry.
Yes.
For those at home viewing, what was that about, and what did you guys go into?
Yeah, we normally do panels at conventions, a panel called Breaking Into Comics, and that panel is about telling amateurs how to get into comics. And we bring up working Marvel talent to say, what did you do? Like, what tips can you give to the next generation of creators? Like, how do they get into comics themselves the Marvel way? And so we changed things up this year. This is the first time we've done the panel this way, which is basically making comics the Marvel way, which is, once you get into comics, what's next? What's my collaboration going to be like? What goes into the planning for a cover? How do I send my pencils to an inker? How does the inker send the inks to a colorist? What does a colorist think about when they're coloring a page? And specifically the Marvel way, because Marvel genuinely is the best mainstream superhero company in the world, and we lead the industry because of that. And so you may not see it on the page every time you look at a comic, but it's there. There's a DNA, a dynamism, a Marvel dynamism that's in the comics. And so that's what we want to do with these panels, is show people this is what, once you get into the company, these are the kinds of things you need to think about to make them Marvel stories specifically. And so the panel went great. We had Mark Brooks up there as a cover artist, Nick Spencer, writer of Amazing Spider-Man, Victor Alazaba and Edgar Delgado also working on Amazing Spider-Man, Josh Cassara, who's an artist on Sentry and just finished up Falcon, and and CB Cebulski was up there with us as well. It was a great time. It was a great time. And so I think we're going to do it more. The room was packed. We had great questions from the audience, and so we're going to get better at it. I think we'll take it across the world, I guess, going forward. So yeah, I'm excited.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So when you find new talent, it must feel like catching lightning in a bottle, as they say. How often does that happen, and how excited do you get when that happens?
Every month. It happens 2 or 3 times a month. And like I said, I went to a convention in Mexico in February, I believe. And so since February, 3 different artists have gotten work with us from that convention.
Okay,
it's because I met people at the convention. We talked about stuff. We stayed in contact. They kept sending in samples. And it's led to new projects. The projects haven't been announced yet. But
secrets.
Yeah, secret things.
Secrets.
But the feeling is great though. The feeling is, it's the kind of thing you don't ever forget. You always remember. I remember that guy's first work with us. I remember that guy's first work with us. And those artists also remember that too because it's important to them.
Yeah.
They remember how they broke in. They also remember the editors they worked with, the writers they worked with, and they grow from there. The hope is that once you get the foot in the door, you're not done. Once you get in the foot in the door, you have to keep working. You have to keep hustling to try to get that next job because you're only as good as the last job you had. So we try to work with them to keep going. We don't want to just put them in the door and say, okay, you're fend for yourself. We want to help them through the process as well beyond that.
Yeah,
so
cultivate that talent.
Yeah.
So considering all the comics that you bring talent in for, is there anything that you're reading right now that you maybe weren't expecting to read, but these new creators just got you so hooked?
Sure. Yeah, we've got a new book, The Century, from writer Jeff Lemire. Donny Cates brought him back in his run on Doctor Strange.
It's so good.
It was really great. It was a surprise. It was a fun surprise for readers.
Machine. Oh man.
And so Jeff Lemire is writing this really thoughtful, character-driven story with Century, who's conflicted. Longtime Marvel fans will know the character. And the artist on the book is Kim Jacinto. Kim broke out on Avengers No Surrender, our weekly Avengers book, earlier this year. And the book looks incredible. He's doing the covers on it. It looks fantastic. His backup artist in the series is Josh Cassara. Josh's work complements Kim's work really well, and he's working in kind of an ink wash style with a lot of texture. So it's very gritty and feels different.
Yeah.
So that's a book where I thought, I read The Century when it came out before, but reading this new book, I'm like, I can't wait for the next issue. And then I think the next issue is out the second issue is out next week, and I've been dying because I heard the pitch, but I didn't realize how much I was going to enjoy the first issue. And Jeff Lemire is a really fantastic blockbuster, underappreciated writer, I think. So that book's been great. The X-Men Red has also been a favorite. Tom Taylor, Mahmoud Asrar, now Carmen Carnero is on it. And this is a book with Jean Grey back, and she's got her own X-Men team, and they're being proactive about finding mutants in the world. And I didn't really know exactly where that book would fit in the X-Men universe, but it's been fantastic so far. So,
awesome.
Yeah, great books.